My name is Zach Arnold. I'm a Hollywood film and television editor, a documentary director, father of two, and creator of Optimize Yourself. Since beginning my career, I have battled attention issues, anxiety, and creative burnout more times than I can keep track of. Back in 2005, after almost losing the battle with suicidal depression, I decided that I no longer wanted to sacrifice myself for the sake of my career. I was done barely surviving. I wanted to thrive. Since then, I have obsessively searched for every possible way to optimize my own creative performance. My journey is far from complete, but I have now made it my mission to shorten your learning curve so you can forge your own path to greatness without having to sacrifice balance in the process. Now it's time to start designing the optimized version of you. Hello and welcome to episode number 16 of the Optimize Yourself podcast. If you're a first-time listener, I'm grateful to have you with me, and I appreciate you taking the time to focus on finding just a little bit of work-life balance and sanity in this ridiculously crazy world that we live in. If you enjoy this podcast and you are inspired to learn more and listen more, I invite you to subscribe in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or whatever app you prefer, because I have tons of great guests, giveaways, and free training coming your way on a weekly basis. Just visit optimizeyourself.me/subscribe for more info, or you can just subscribe directly in your app of choice. If you've been keeping up with the latest episodes, then you know that October is Advance Yourself Month, and we are diving into the weeds, talking about taking practical, boots-on-the-ground action steps to move your creative career forwards. Or more specifically this week, how to transition from climbing one ladder to climbing a different one, even if that means taking one step back to take several forwards in the future. I am super excited for today's episode because it is with Wendy Calhoun, who happens to not only be an incredibly decorated and accomplished writer and producer in Hollywood, but she's also the very first person to ever hire me as a professional editor in Los Angeles. Wendy has worked on such gigantic network TV shows as Empire, Nashville, Justified, and Revenge, just to name a few. She is also no stranger to adversity, given that she has climbed her way to the top in an incredibly competitive area of Hollywood, which, as I already mentioned, is writing and executive producing. And now she's showrunning with upcoming projects such as No Place Safe for FX and Our Kind of People for Fox. And while great strides have been made in the past several years, let's just not beat around the bush. Making it as an accomplished writer-producer is either a female or an African American is incredibly tough, but doing it as both is infinitely tougher. But regardless of the obstacles that stood in her way, Wendy forged ahead, changed her career path several times, overcame numerous obstacles, including a massive case of imposter syndrome, and she defied the odds. In this episode, we deconstruct Wendy's unusual path to climb the ladder to the top, to understand the basic fundamental steps that you can take to achieve the same levels of success regardless of your circumstances. And if you don't think that there are basic steps that you can follow to make it in Hollywood, well, I've got good news for you. I recently released my brand new Ultimate Guide to Making It in Hollywood as a Creative, which is an absolute manifesto on the practical steps that you can start taking right away to either get started with or advance in your filmmaking career. Now, no matter what creative craft you specialize in, the strategies that I provide in this guide will absolutely help you move forwards. I cover such topics as how to figure out which ladder you should be climbing and how to clarify the niche that's the best fit for your skill set, how to become awesome at your specific craft, and how to pitch yourself. And most importantly, I do a deep dive into the art and science of networking, especially if you are crazy, extremely introverted like me. This is 15 years of everything that I've learned throughout my own professional journey distilled down to one jam-packed guide, and I'm offering to you 100% free. To download your guide, just go to optimizeyourself.me/Hollywood Ultimate Guide, and I will send it to you immediately. Lastly, before we jump into our interview, I want to give a brief update about the podcast review giveaways. I have been absolutely overwhelmed by the response and the reviews that I've gotten so far, and frankly, even a few of them have brought a tear to my eye. You guys and gals are an amazingly supportive audience, and I cannot thank you enough. And while I am well on the way to my goal of having 100 reviews by December 1st, we still have a long ways to go. For those that have entered the sweepstakes so far, I am ready to announce September's winners. For the review that's titled, Great Variety of Ideas for Maximizing Your Potential, Laura Beth Oliver wins a human charger. Congrats, Laura. For the review titled, Now I Get It About Sitting All Day, Noak McNeil is the winner of a Topo Mat or a Topo Mini. And funny enough, given that your review is all about learning about the benefits of standing more, this prize should be a perfect fit. And lastly, for her review titled, Changed My Perspective, Moni Salazar wins a 1-hour private coaching and mentorship session with me. Congrats, Moni. I cannot wait to help you solve your number one challenge. I'm going to reach out to all of you privately via email to get your prizes taken care of right away. Now, for everybody listening who hasn't left a review yet, all you have to do is visit optimizeyourself.me/win to learn more. And remember, all I'm looking for is honest reviews, nothing more. I cannot thank you enough for your support. You guys are awesome. And now, without further ado, after a brief break to recognize our sponsors, my interview with Wendy Calhoun. To access the show notes for this episode, please visit optimizeyourself.me/episode 16. This episode is made possible by ErgoDriven, the makers of the Topo Mat and Topo Mini, my number one recommendations for anybody interested in moving more at their height-adjustable workstation. Listen, standing desks are only great if you're standing well. Otherwise, you're constantly fighting fatigue and chronic pain. Not like any other anti-fatigue mat, the Topo is scientifically proven to help you move more throughout the day, which helps reduce discomfort and also increase your focus and productivity. And they're really fun and a great conversation starter too. To learn more, visit optimizeyourself.me/topo. That's TOPO. This episode is made possible by the Human Charger, a revolutionary new light therapy device made specifically for people who spend long days in the dark and don't get enough sunlight, i.e. you and me. Simply put in the earbuds for 12 minutes a day to receive your daily recommended dosage of UV-free white light. Doing so can drastically increase your energy, improve your mood, and increase mental alertness and focus. This device has literally changed my life, and I use it every morning without fail. To learn more, visit optimizeyourself.me/human charger, and you can use the code OPTIMIZE to get 20% off your order. I'm here today with Wendy Calhoun, and this is going to be a very, very interesting conversation because Wendy is the very first person that ever hired me as an editor in Los Angeles, and we have known each other for, and God, I don't even want to say the number. I really don't. But we've known each other for like 15 years, and this is going to be a different type of conversation for us because number one, it's recorded, and number two, there aren't several glasses of wine involved. But regardless, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to record this for my audience so we can share some of your wisdom.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, the reason that I really wanted to have you on today, we talked a little bit beforehand in the bio about how you've become very successful on the writing and producing side of things in television, but there's this sense of there's no path. I have no idea how to get there, and there's no guarantees, and I can get a master's degree for $100,000 as a writer or as an editor or a director, but I could be getting people coffee the rest of my life. And I think that you're the perfect example of somebody that just followed the right steps to get where you are, even though there was no discernible reason that it should have just been given to you. So let's start just by helping the audience understand your career path a little bit, like your origin story.
Sure, absolutely. I'm really into all different kinds of philosophies. I read them all the time and apply them to my work all the time. And the one that's resonating with me the most right now is it's not what you do, it's why you do it. And I think that that's a good place to start with this conversation. I've always felt like I just had something to say. And that drive to have my voice in the world has gotten me through all the uncertainty of every step. So I really just guess I'll start there. But For me, it was improv, actually, as a middle schooler. I would go to improv competitions, and improv is simply writing on your feet, right, while you perform. And I found it really just so fulfilling. I loved it. I loved the challenge of it, and started writing plays when I was in high school. And the first play I wrote was produced, which is kind of amazing. I was a sophomore at the Performing Arts High School in Dallas, Texas. At that time, it was called the Arts Magnet at Booker T. Washington. And I don't know, something happened magical the opening night of that play. It was all fantasy, by the way. Everything I wrote in it was fantasy. I hadn't had any of the experiences of anything I was really writing about, except I kind of knew the main character. That first main character is always kind of a piece of you, it's part of me. And I watched people saying my words on stage, and I was just blown away by it. I thought it was so fulfilling. And then my father, who at the time I was doing a lot of performing myself, I was acting quite a bit, and my father would never really come to see me act in any of my plays, but he came to see the play that I wrote. And afterwards he came up to me and he said, "That was really good. You should do that." And I think every time I've ever gotten a pass or a rejection, I just think about my father. You know what? You're good. Just do it. Don't worry about it. Dad said you were good years ago when you didn't know what you were doing. And you just kept going. So from there, I kept writing plays. I wrote more and more plays. Some of them were produced in professional theaters in Dallas, actually, while I was still a high schooler. And then I went to New York University and studied writing there, and also studied filmmaking. And really, your question about a path, was there a certain path for me to follow? There was none. There really was none. And I kind of like that. I'm one of those people that likes to forge my own path. So I wasn't worried about that too much. I ended up cold calling alumni from NYU. At the time, I thought when I was getting ready to graduate that I would go into development and maybe run my own network someday. That was a big idea I had in my head. But I kept writing, and actually the writing was like just me having fun. It was never like, I have to do this because one day I'm going to make money at this and it's going to be so great. It was really just like, I need to express myself. And for whatever reason, I'm obsessed with putting ideas on a page, and I hear dialogue all the time, and I just want to write. So I kept writing. And as I went out to Hollywood trying to go down this development path that I thought I wanted, I would use my vacation time when I was an assistant to put up my plays. And at one point I had somebody, and again, this is not me on the path saying I want to be a TV writer. That really wasn't part of it. It was just, I'm a creative person and I need to express myself. And I thought, if I have to get a check, well, I should get a check as an executive, right? I mean, that's a normal way. Because I think I was kind of scared of the idea of like being a full-time writer. Like I kind of didn't know that really was an occupation, I think, at first. So I'm just going on and on here. Zach, are you still there?
Oh yeah, no, I'm absolutely here. I love the story, and I want to. Okay. I love stream of consciousness. I love not having a whole bunch of rehearsed questions, and like even so far, things that really resonate with me, and I'm sure resonate with the audience, are that you didn't say in college, all right, I need to come up with a successful career now, and I like writing, so I want to successfully make money being a writer in Hollywood. There was no thought like that. It was more, I had this thing inside. I got to get it out. I almost can't control it. And for me, it's storytelling. It's putting words on the paper, and it's having people express those words. But even though somebody else is saying them, it's my voice, and I'm saying something important to the world. And that's what drove you. And when you say it's why you do something, not what you're doing or even how you're doing it, that's what's so important to me as well. And that's what I'm trying to help other people that are listening find, because it is so hard. Like if you're trying to be an editor or a writer, very, very similar lack of path for both of those careers. But if you can fundamentally find why you're doing that thing, when you run up against hurdles and people say, well, you're not the right fit for this, or why don't you get a real job? Like you're never going to make a living doing this one thing. You keep thinking, but this is part of who I am and what I need to get out and what I need to do. And maybe it's TV writing, maybe it's being an executive, maybe it's writing features. All of them serve the same purpose. So you don't feel like I have to run this set path to do this one thing. So I love all these things about your story already. And we haven't even gotten to all the good parts yet. We've just gotten to the point where, you're just getting settled. So let's keep going.
Yeah. Okay, well, sure. I mean, it's interesting because I think for me, I think I was actually born a producer. Okay. I think that I woke up one day, or actually came out of the womb, actually ready to produce.
You came out of the womb with notes?
Yeah, exactly. I was ready to produce. Like, I don't know why, but that has always been a part of me. Even when I was little, like I was the kid in the neighborhood that was like, we want to raise money. Let's have a toy sale. And I put it all together. Or, like I was that person who was just always like, I set a goal and I just do everything I can to produce it. So that just came to me very, very naturally. What didn't come to me naturally was how to be a writer, to be honest with you. Becoming a writer was something that I did out of, like I said, out of enjoyment of it, out of just feeling this need, like I had something to say and therefore needed to say it. So it's been interesting because I've really felt like I've had to learn how to become a writer. I had to make a very conscious choice at a certain point in my career, and I can tell you when, but I was pretty much along a long path at that point. But I made a choice at one point to say, okay, and you know what? I'm going to be a producer who can write, because I know that in television, at least, in that position, I'll be able to say what I want to say. So that became a very, very clear goal, but it took me a long time to actually get there. And then once I committed to being a writer as a full-time writer to service my producing, quite frankly, then I started to actually have a path, because I could build a path. I could model myself after others. But up until then, I was just playing around. So back to where I left off in the timeline. So yes, as an assistant, I put up my plays. And actually, there were agents who would come and see my plays, because at one time I was an agent's assistant and literary agent's assistant. And during these assistant years, by the way, I assisted Tim Burton. I assisted Mark Burnett. I assisted a lot of very, very powerful people in Hollywood during this time. It was a 5-year stretch. Peter Guber was somebody I worked for quite a bit. But during that time, as an assistant, I was learning really how to be a great producer, because I was working with some really great producers. In this time, this TV agent had come to see one of my plays, and he said, you should write television. And I went and I was like, television? Like, I hadn't even thought of that. Like, if anything, at that time, you were going to write a feature, right? Or the big play or a novel. That's what real writers wrote, not TV. At least that's what I thought. So I tried to for a little while. At that time, Law and Order was really hot. So I tried to watch Law and Order, because everybody said, well, you have to mimic one of these shows and write that down. That was like the thing, write a spec. That's what they call it. So I looked at that and I just was not inspired. I really wasn't. I went ahead and I kept just doing my plays, things I like to write, and didn't really focus too much on trying to become a television writer. The agent just put that bug in my ear at an early point. I finally became a development executive. I actually made it. I got promoted at Village Roadshow Pictures and was in charge of the story department there, evaluating scripts, giving writers notes. I was on my way in terms of what I had decided to do when I came out to Hollywood to begin with. But I kept writing. I couldn't stop. And I even started ghostwriting on some of the features that we had at Village. And my bosses there knew that I was a writer, because I actually wrote a screenplay while I was there that a different company optioned. And I got into trouble for not showing it to my colleagues at Village first. They said, you work here, we should have a first look. And I was like, really? I didn't know you guys cared that I wrote. I really didn't think about it. But it was very funny, because this is a beautiful Hollywood moment here for you. I actually wrote notes on scripts that Graham Yost, the writer Graham Yost, was writing in features. I was giving him notes. He didn't realize it. It was coming through the executive that I was working for, right? But I was the one who was actually reading it during the evaluation of it. And I know, and many, many years later, he's really been an angel in my career, Graham Yost. But at that time, I had no idea. I was considering projects that Mark Burnett was sending in. And this is before Survivor. I was like, I was crossing the paths with all these really, really interesting people at a very early point in my career, and had no idea that would loop back, but it did. So, anyways, after Village, what happened was the company basically merged with Warner Brothers. And there was a mass, sort of firing that went on, layoffs and consolidation. My bosses were laid off. I was laid off. My bosses knew I was a writer. Before these layoffs happened, they had already sold a show to Animal Planet called The Aquanauts. And it was 52 half an hours of Jacques Cousteau meets Road Rules. And because my bosses knew I was a writer, they came to me and said, we need a head writer on this. Can you do it? And I was like, I had never even thought about writing an Animal Planet show. Like, I didn't know anything about that. But I took the footage and I started writing up scripts for it, and I sent it in to them. And they were like, this is great. Can you just do this? I was like, okay. It was TV boot camp for me, and that was my first TV job.
And I was always curious, because I'm assuming in this timeline, this is around the time that you and I connected. But I always wondered what in the world got you to the point where you were working on a nationally syndicated show for PBS called High Tech Home. And it made, at the time, like, I had just come out of college. I was an assistant editor. I'd been an assistant for maybe 2 months. So it was like 2 months out of college. And this kind of coincides with like my break, and I think your break, and all this kind of comes together. So I don't want to, take the time away from you too much, but to kind of transition there, I had just started as an assistant, and one of the freelance editors at the place where I was working, this was a trailer company, he had said, listen, I'm doing this show for PBS right now, and I'm looking for somebody else that can maybe help pick up the slack and do some of the work for me. And I jumped at the chance, like super eager beaver like I am. I handed him my demo reel, which was on a VHS tape, and he got back to me the next day. He's like, damn, you can cut, kid. Like, how would you like to cut half the season with me? I'm like, oh my God, a TV show? I get to edit half the season? Like, this is 2 months out of college. And then that's when you and I met. So that's kind of where our stories start to intersect. But I always wondered, how in the world did your path lead you to a PBS show about, technology in fancy homes? So Now I understand that part of the story. Now we can kind of continue from there.
I was almost at that point. Well, basically, after Aquanauts, I started doing some shows for World of Wonder. Yeah, I had done like 100 Greatest Dance Songs and, countdown shows of music. And actually, that was actually a foundation for a lot of the music scripted writing I did later, because I spent about a year going down to the MTV libraries and just watching interviews and documentaries about musicians and the life of musicians. So I actually had a treasure trove of stories about the music industry before I even came to Nashville or Empire, which was helpful. But anyways, so I was doing these non-scripted, quote unquote, shows. And really, they're just information shows. You're delivering information, basically. And that's how I came across High Tech Homes. I had been looking for a show to do, and I think I found that as like an ad somewhere. And I just responded to the ad and they called me in. And that's how I started working on that. But I've been doing these sort of informational shows for Discovery and that kind of thing before. Yeah, it's interesting. A couple of years into that process, though, I was like, I really want to get back to my writing. I really want to get back to the drama. And the saving grace, I think, for me was 6 Feet Under, because the show 6 Feet Under came on HBO, and I started watching it, and I thought, oh, if that's what television is, then I want to write television, because I just really loved the show. It spoke to me, and I thought I could write a version of that for sure. And so I did. I wrote a spec of it. Went to some NYU alumni meetings. I ran into an old agent that I had assisted, and I said, listen, I'm out here in the world. I want to get into 1-hour dramas. Now I'm ready. What should I do? And he introduced me to the man who became my manager. And that manager, what was great was that he worked in reality. He represented a lot of reality and nonfiction companies, but he also had some clients that he was trying to break into 1-hour drama as well. So it was great because I knew I would be able to find work with him, but also he could help me make the transition from quote unquote non-scripted, which is totally scripted, by the way, to
God, really? Wait, I'm gonna edit that part out because I don't want to disappoint anybody that watches reality TV. She's lying. It's not scripted. It's all real. I promise.
Are you kidding? It's very much scripted. But anyways, you can cut that out if you want.
No, I'm kidding. My audience, I'm sure, already knows.
Yes. I mean, to the point, like literally before you go out for those things, you write a whole outline. You kind of already know where you're going to attack story before you even shoot anything. And this is reality, quote unquote. Then you're there and you know from your outline sort of what you're looking for. So as you're watching the reality unfold, you really navigate with the camera and you go and you pull out that story that you want. You're working right there. And then, of course, you go in the edit room and you make it perfect. But you're writing the whole time.
Yeah.
But anyways.
And many of the people listening are probably those editors going through the 27 camera angles and trying to turn, just a whole mess of stuff into a scene and tell a story. So I'm sure they all understand that process very, very well and can relate.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I love it, actually. I think it's really fun. I love that process. But anyways, I went around for about 5 years with those scripts. I just kept writing more specs. I was really influenced by Ryan Murphy, by the way. I remember writing a Nip Tuck, just watching a lot of 1 hour drama, writing specs and writing original still plays and material and knocking on doors. And it was hard because I had a lot of encouragement. People telling me, oh, you're really talented. Oh, this is really good. And then not making me any job offers. For a while, I thought it was never going to happen. I really got to the point where things were going well in reality. And I finally made it to a show that I was really loved called Hell's Kitchen. I did the second season of that. And they were sending me into the field to direct. I was really happy and kind of was just over being rejected for my 1 hour dramas. I started feeling like, well, maybe that's just a sign. Maybe I need to stop. But sure enough, that year that I was on Hell's Kitchen, the call came in, and it actually was the only interview I had the entire year. Like I had no other scripted dramas that were interested in me that year. It was depressing. But I went on the one job interview thinking, for God's sakes, they'll never hire me, right? So much rejection after all those years. And I really didn't care if I got the job or not. I was so over it. I just wanted to go back to my Hell's Kitchen and keep making my show. And so I was very sort of cavalier in my interview and wasn't attached to the outcome of it. And even broke some rules. They tell you when you go on these interviews to be a writer on a staff, not to pitch ideas for the show. So up until this point, I probably had already had like 40, 50 interviews, right? Where I followed the rules. I was very good, followed my rules. This interview, I come in, I didn't care, so I didn't follow the rules. And I started pitching ideas for the show. Well, by 6:00 that night, I got a call from my agent. They really liked you. And the next day, we got an offer. And that was a Friday. And they said, they want you to start on Monday. And that's how I got my first writing job.
Wow. And what show was that?
It was a show called Reigns. It starred Jeff Goldblum. And it was really a really strong writing room. As a matter of fact, Frank Darabont directed the pilot. Graham Yost wrote the pilot. So that's where I first met Graham, where I really met him. I mean, I'd given him notes on a script that he didn't know about years before. But this is where I met him. And it was a great room. I mean, the people in that room, you've got Maura Wally-Beckett, who went on to Breaking Bad. You've got Jennifer Hutchinson. She was a second assistant who went on to Breaking Bad. You've got Dave Andron, who's running Snowfall right now. We work together again on Justified. You've got Taylor Elmore, who does a lot of CBS right now. I think he's on Limitless. We also work together on Justified. You've got Josh Singer, who won an Oscar for Spotlight. These were all the writers in that room. And we were all, at that point, we were all still very, new to the process. So it was really interesting. And one day I pitched out an idea for an episode of Reigns that I wanted to set in the world of hip hop. And Graham really liked the idea and I wrote it and he loved the script. The show ended up getting canceled right before we were supposed to shoot it. Right before we were supposed to shoot my very first episode of television I'd ever written, the show got canceled. I was also 9 months pregnant. So...
Well, maybe it all worked out for the best, right?
It did all work out for the best. I, got to go have my baby and be with my baby for 4 months, off in between seasons. And in the meantime, a couple of guys took over our offices who were making the pilot for a show called Life that was going to star Damian Lewis. And Graham Yost, who's my angel, went to the showrunners of that Life pilot and said, if you guys get a series order, you really should consider hiring Wendy. And so they made good on that promise and brought me in for an interview when they got their pickup. And I wrote on Life for the entire duration of that series.
And for anybody, and I'm guessing for most people listening, they're like, wait, Damian Lewis is in a show called Life? Like, this is before he was Damian Lewis, before Homeland. And the first season of Life is one of the most entertaining, satisfying seasons of any television show I've ever watched. It just comes out of nowhere, but it is so well done. And I remember even reaching out to you because we hadn't connected in a while. And I'm just like, this show's amazing. Where did it come from? And who are these people? Like, it's so good and so enjoyable. So anybody that's listening is like, oh yeah, I've never heard of it. Watch it. Like, go on Netflix or on Apple. I'm not sure where it is, but it's a fantastic show.
Yeah, it was great. So that was NBC. And yeah, you're right. That was before Homeland. It was a lot of fun. Sarah Shahi was also in it. I got to work with a lot of actors that I then ended up casting in later shows that I worked on. And that was a powerhouse room as well, powerhouse writers. So yeah, when Life was looking like it wasn't going to get picked up for a third season, I had gotten a call. We hadn't been canceled yet, but I'd gotten a call from Graham saying, hey, we just cast this guy, Timothy Oliphant, and this pilot I wrote, which is an Elmore Leonard adaptation. And if it goes to series, I'd love for you to do it. Now, this call came to me in the mid-spring, and this is right before staffing season. So this is another kind of career gamble I had to take. Did I want to sit out staffing season, basically, and wait for Graham's call and in the hopes that it would get picked up? I mean, I had no guarantee, but I decided that was worth it because I really enjoyed working with him. And when I read the pilot, I loved it. And then I started just getting ready. I just started acting as if Justified was going to go. I was going to be on it. And so I needed to get ready. I just went there with my mindset, and I read as much Elmore Leonard as I can. And sure enough, they got their pickup. I went in to meet with Michael Denner, Sarah Timmerman, and Graham Yost, and I was ready to go day one. I was like, here's the stories. I was all about Boyd. I couldn't wait. Boyd had died in the original pilot. I really advocated for him not to be dead. Please reconsider, and I told him why, because I loved that character. Oh, I love villains. So sure enough, we started in that room, and it was a blast, just a blast. I had a really kind of a pivotal moment in the second season of that show. I had done some research in between season 1 and season 2, and I went to Harlan, Kentucky by myself, which is where it was set. And that's where I first heard stories about a real life bootlegger that lived in Harlan, who was this incredible woman. She was 100 or so when she died, but she basically was like the biggest criminal boss in the whole area. I thought that was cool. So I started working on this character that became Mags. And Mags was the season-long villain of season 2. And what Mags did for me was it, sort of made me realize that I was starting to really get good as a writer. And good as a writer to me is not just like being flowery on the page. Good as a writer is like finding those stories like a homing pigeon and finding great characters and then really keep crafting and pushing and fighting for them and bring them to the screen. And that showed me that I had the capability to do that. And Margot Martindale's performance of Mags was just phenomenal. She ended up winning an Emmy that year. And it was just incredible. And actually, to this day, it's one of my favorite seasons of television I've ever been a part of, second season of Justified. But also, it was kind of one of those things where I thought, okay, how do I top that? I don't know how to top that. I thought there's nowhere else to go here for me. And I ended up getting a script from somebody who loved Life, the TV show. An assistant loved Life and gave one of my episode scripts to this guy named Mike Kelly. And Mike Kelly was developing a pilot, or he had just shot a pilot that had picked up the series called Revenge. And so this assistant said, she's so great from Life, we should have her on Revenge. And so they called me in for an interview. And it was interesting because I wasn't on the market. I wasn't out looking for a job. I mean, I I was very much like going to go back to Justified. I just didn't know how I was going to top it. But I got the pilot script for Revenge and I was intrigued. Oh, wow. There's a female villain. There's a female anti-hero. And that was, at that time, that this was groundbreaking. And also this idea that you could bring back the nighttime soap. There was no nighttime soap on TV anymore. And I grew up watching Dallas and Dynasty and Falcon Crest. And I was like, where are those shows? We need those shows, that escapism and the kind of like the hijinks. I liked that, the high wire hijinks of it all, of the soap. So I thought this could be really fun. I mean, Mags taught me that I could write a great female villain. And here I could have the opportunity not only a great female villain, which was played by Madeline Stowe in that series, but also this great anti-hero, which was Emily Thorne. So I went in, I was really passionate about it, and I got the job on Revenge. I was so happy. I was sad though. I had to, tell Graham I wasn't going to come back for any more Justified, but I was really happy. I was also kind of excited to go back to network, honestly. I really feel the difference in cable versus network. I like the pressure cooker of network, of broadcast. I think cable has a wonderful place, and digital obviously is a whole new ballgame. But I really do like actually making things for broadcast. So I don't know. Call me strange.
Well, now you've said things like hip hop, pressure cooker, network, Dallas, Dynasty, soap opera. Like, I think all of those keywords are leading us somewhere else in this story.
Oh yeah, it all comes together. Everything comes full circle. So here's the thing. Revenge that was an interesting thing, because I don't know how much detail I want to go into of all this, because it's a convoluted story. And basically one day you're going to have to buy the book, because I will write a memoir. But basically things didn't work out for me on Revenge for political reasons. And I took some time off. I wrote a little bit and I got ready for the next staffing season. Actually, I had my heart set on going to do The Following, if you remember that show on Fox.
Yeah, that's the Kevin Bacon one, right?
Kevin Bacon one, yeah. Because, I had written a lot of law enforcement between Life and Justified. And really, I knew I could do the dark stuff. And thought, well, I would like to do that. I ended up going all the way to having a meeting with Kevin Williamson, but that meeting was pretty clear to me after it that I didn't actually want to write that show. And that was heartbreaking. I went home from that after thinking for a whole season that that's what I wanted to do, to suddenly thinking, I don't really want to do that. And my agent, this was a Friday night, I won't forget this either. And he's like, well, listen, there's some people that want to meet with you tomorrow morning, Saturday at 7. It's like, who wants to meet at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning? It was the guy who directed the pilot, RJ Cutler of Nashville. They said, read Nashville tonight. And Nashville wasn't even on my radar, by the way. I had met with all the networks. And you do this. You go around to these staffing meetings. You meet with the networks. They tell you kind of like, oh, you'd be great for this show or that show. And they put you kind of on their list for those shows. And you gear up for those meetings if they happen. No one mentioned Nashville to me ever. So I didn't know what it was. But I read it that night, and I loved Callie's writing, Callie Curry. And like I said, I had that plethora of music knowledge. And I also was really interested in the character Deacon, because I've dealt with people with sobriety issues, and I wanted to write about what it means to love an alcoholic. I thought that'd be really cool. So I went in, I said that in my interview with RJ, and he actually said, we're going to make you an offer in the meeting. And I thought, okay. I said, I'll do it. The deal was kind of done at breakfast. And so in less than 24 hours, like my life changed. You know what I mean? That happens quite a bit to me. I don't know why. But anyways, I'm on Nashville. I'm loving Nashville. It was really, really fun. It was a very, very, very difficult show to try to help launch in the first season. We got pushed and pulled around a lot. There were firings. It was difficult. However, sometimes I'd go into the room to lighten things up, and I pitched the Black version of the show. I called it Detroit. I was like, if this was Detroit, and I would just go into all these long riffs of just like these crazy stories and reimagining, Connie Britton and Hayden Panettiere as Black women, and like just the whole thing. And I would have the room, they would just be crying, laughing. They'd be on the floor, and we would have such a good time. And sure enough, in season 2, somebody slips me the Empire pilot script. And I read it at like 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning, something like that, before I went to set on Nashville. And I think to myself, Jesus, I've been pitching this for a year and a half. I've been pitching these same stories. I know this show. I know this show backwards and forwards. Just in reading the pilot, like I knew immediately that I could do it. So I pushed hard. And, it was kind of really hard discussions with my agent, who was like, you have a job. You have a great job. Why do you want to leave a great job for a pilot that we don't know if it's going to do anything? And again, that's that blind faith. It's not what you do, it's why you do it. I had never written a Black show. I'm an African-American female. By that point, I'd been in the business a good 15 years. Never written a Black show. That's crazy. I was like, that's why I want to do it. I want the challenge of writing this show because it could be historic, is what I felt. And then I also felt there was this giant audience of people of color who were being completely underserved. They weren't seeing themselves on TV. They weren't seeing themselves in like fantasy positions a lot. They see themselves on the news and it's negative. And I thought, we need escapism too. So I was really driven by that, something much bigger than me. And it gave me enough confidence that I actually had to go in and quit my job on Nashville before I even knew if I was going to get the offer on Empire. Now that was scary. And that was hard. I went to my husband. I said, I'm gambling again. I really do feel like a big gambler, because I don't know what's going to happen here, but I just feel it that this is what I need to do. I need to do this show. And so he's like, all right, and honestly, the love that I get from my husband and my family is why I'm able to do a lot of what I do. I'm able to take a lot of risks, and they take those risks with me, and their support gives me the confidence to go for it. To make moves, and I've made moves in my career I think other people would never have made. But it set me up, right? I do Empire, and that season 1 was pretty phenomenal on a lot of different levels. As a writer, it was amazingly fun to finally be writing Black voices and more than one Black voice in a script. Amazingly fun to not be the only Black writer in the room every day, coming to work and being surrounded by other people of color. It was just, oh my God, it was like a rainbow in the middle of my clouds, And then on the set, so fun, working with some of the best actors around, and then just bringing to that set all of the things that I learned in reality. And I know, I'll write about this one day, I'm sure, in my memoir. But I think that is what I brought to Empire season 1. And I think that is part of the reason it was as successful as it was, because I added to it enough play on the set that I was able to capture moments that feel so real because they were real. Now they were engineered. They were engineered in a way that I knew we were going to get the story covered, but I just allowed on that set a few takes always where I could get the magic in the performer's eyes, if you will, to say, hey, let's just play. All right, let's do another version, but we're not going to tell the other actor what we're going to do. Let's just do it. Let's just play and make them really be in the moment when those cameras are on. That's what I think people don't realize they were watching, but they were a lot in Empire season 1. And I think that was part of the magic. But anyways, so that was phenomenal. And then of course, everything changed in season 2. The show came out of the box. It was a gigantic hit. And lots of people who had nothing to do with it in season 1 suddenly started to take ownership of something they didn't really own. And, and then that just sort of reinforced my belief that if I was going to really make the kind of changes that I want to make and see happen in Hollywood, I needed to be a show creator. I couldn't just go keep taking jobs on other people's shows. If I want to see more women directing, more women writing, I need to be in a position of power where I can help fight for that and push for that. If I want to see more people of color stories being told, I believe that has to be baked into the DNA of a series. Then as a creator of the series, I can do that. I can set it up for that. And I can set it up to where there will be many, many people of color creating that show, performing on that show, and ultimately watching that show. And I think they appreciate authenticity that's from the bottom up, not trickle down authenticity, where you just basically put a person of color's face on the camera, but they're not actually in any kind of story that's authentic to their life experience. So yeah, and that kind of takes me where I am today, which is pretty amazing. I've got 3 shows that I'm juggling, that I'm developing. All 3 I'm a creator of. One I'm doing with ABC Signature and FX, which is a miniseries to star Regina King. And John Ridley is one of my executive producers on that. And it's really been just so fun. Some of the best writing I've ever done. And then another, which is a piece, big soap, family soap, right along the lines of Revenge and Nashville and Empire. And that one I am working on actually right now. I had written it. At first, I sold it to Netflix, and I'd written it towards them. I just recently resold it to Fox and Turnaround. We got it back and Turnaround. I sold it to Fox because I know broadcast, and I know the broadcast soap. I feel like I've been an instrumental part in its development and in its prominence on the television landscape. And it's my lane. When it comes to that kind of show, it's my lane. So I'm really happy to be doing that again. And then a third piece, which is a wonderful adaptation. We've just gone out and pitched it, and knock on wood, we're waiting to hear back on some offers.
Well, I love it. The first thing I'll note is that I think you may set a record for me asking the least amount of questions on a show, which I think everybody's going to appreciate, because I just absolutely loved hearing your story. And secondly, you're a very, very humble person. And I've said this off the record before, but now that I'm recording, I want to say this on the record before it's officially true, but I know it's going to be true. You will be the next Shonda Rhimes. I just want to make sure everybody knows that you're going to be the next powerhouse. I've got 8 shows going simultaneously, show creator, director. Just want to make that clear on the record right now.
Well, that's so lovely. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. She's a powerhouse, no doubt. I think I'm going to be the next me. I don't want to compare myself to anyone. What I'm really excited about right now is that the miniseries is in cable, the family soap is in broadcast, and there's a very good chance this other piece I'm doing is going to be for digital. Now that to me is cool. That's a trifecta. In terms of television, that's taking advantage of kind of every outlet that's available at this point in time and making a piece for that. And like the challenge of that to me is super fun. Like I love it. So luckily, all 3 of the pieces they're all things I just adore. I mean, I have other, I have a lot. I have other things too that I'm always developing, because you say powerhouse. I wouldn't compare myself to Shonda in one way, which is I think eventually I will get to the point where it's not critical for me to be writing every single one of these pieces. Like I said, writing has been that instrument for me as a producer. So I do see that ultimately I will be known as a producer. And I think ultimately you will see that I will be producing a lot. And that means nurturing a lot of writers and bringing in their voices. Because I don't feel like every show has to be my voice. I really don't. There's some shows that are going to be my voice. And then I hope that I have the wherewithal to recognize a show that I would love to produce, but isn't necessarily my voice, and finding the right voice for it. So that's where I'm headed.
And I think all that's fantastic. And I obviously, as you and I have talked about offline before, very much hope to be a part of this journey when the time comes. So just gonna, officially plant that seed. And we've talked about that many times. But
yeah.
Where I want to go with the last bit of the show, what I always try to do when people tell their stories and talk about like where they started, the challenges they overcame, how they became successful, it's so easy for somebody listening to your story or another person's story that's similar and say, that's amazing, but she met this person and she met that person and this thing happened and she was in the right place at the right time. Oh, that's great, but that's never going to happen to me. There's no set path. And what I want to do is extract what I think are the 4 largest takeaways. And anytime that any young kid comes up to me, it's not even young kids anymore because I'm not young or a kid either. I now have like children in elementary school and still accepting that. But anyway, that's a total tangent. But they always say, listen, there's no path. I don't understand how to make it. Like, what piece of advice would you give? And I always give them, like, these are the 4 things that you need to do. And when I used to say it was 2, then it was 3. And I'm now kind of formulated into these 4 fundamental ideas that I'm actually turning into a coaching program and turning into a full online course so anybody can follow this path. But every single story that I hear, like yours, has these 4 pieces. So I know this fundamental path exists. The first one that I always tell people is you have to be excellent at your craft. And there's no question that I heard at least 10 times during your story, well, I was working on this, I was writing this spec, I was writing that spec. Even when writing wasn't the ultimate vehicle for you, it was producing, you just saw that as a means to an end. You were always working on your craft. And I feel like no matter what happens, if somebody finds you, if you're discovered, you get quote unquote lucky, whatever it is, if your work isn't great and you haven't been developing your craft, all that's worthless because somebody's going to say, well, that stuff's not that good. So it doesn't matter if you're in the right place at the right time.
Absolutely. I always love the look on young writers' faces when they come, and they don't have to be young, by the way, any writer's face, especially a new writer, let's say. And they'll come to me and they say, I got a spec. I need to get it to an agent. And I'll say to them, how many times have you rewritten it? And they'll look at me like they haven't rewritten it at all, or maybe once, and they feel guilty. And I say, well, rewrite it about 10 more times and they'll be ready. And that's the truth. So what happened to me, you talk about, being great at your craft. I think what has happened to me in the last year, which has been so exciting, I kind of felt it the moment it happened, was that I reached my 10,000 hours. I truly believe in that. I think that Mr. Gladwell was onto something when he said that it takes 10,000 hours to become a professional. And if you can stick out, you can put in those hours, you're going to wake up one day and actually just be really good at whatever it was you put the hours in, just because you did, you went through it. And that's how I feel about writing. I reached the 10,000 hours, and it's all those years of just keep showing up. And it's been hard because there's definitely been scripts I've had to wrestle to the ground. And then there's other ones that, flew very easily. But when I sit down to work on my craft, I know that there's a knowingness, there's a confidence because I put in the hours. I know the craft. I know I can say that. I'm a professional at it. And so with that confidence comes, it allows you to be creative.
Yeah. And it's so craft is so huge. And it's so funny you talking about that kind of esoteric realization of, I think I've hit my 10,000 hours. I had that exact same moment when I was working on Empire.
Oh, wow.
It was the first time I just finally felt comfortable saying, wow, I'm actually good at this. Like
Yes.
I understand how this job works, and I'm in an arena where nobody would doubt that this is, near the top of the game, at least in television, bullets flying everywhere, crazy deadlines, incredibly difficult show. And I was totally managing it. And I not only managing it, but I felt like I was delivering fairly good work. And I was like, all this, 25 years of editing stuff is starting to pay off. This is all making sense. So,
yes.
So craft is a huge, huge part of it. And I think really if there is, whatever the biggest one is of these 4 ideas that I'm going to bring up, craft is always the biggest one because the rest fall apart if craft isn't there. But the second one that I think is so important, and these were the first 2 pieces of advice whenever somebody came up to me, and I've since developed it into the 4, but I would say, listen, you have to be excellent at your craft, but then people have to know that you're excellent at your craft, because that's a fundamental mistake that so many quote unquote creative people make, is they sit there in their dark little room, whether it's writing, whether it's editing. And I frankly think that writers and editors are cut from almost the exact same cloth.
Yeah, they are.
But like the last thing you want to do is go out and meet people. Like like socializing and networking, like that's what producers and actors do. Like, I don't want to do that. I'm amazing at what I do, and people are just going to discover me. It's like, it doesn't work that way. And I heard so many times in your journey saying, I cold called these people and I sent this out and that out. Like, you were making very clear to people, hey, I'm here, and guess what? I'm really good at what I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking at I'm in my bedroom at the moment. There's a book on my nightstand, and it's called Show Your Work. It's a whole book it's by Austin Kleon, and it's really cool because he just sort of, it's a book for an artist to just pick up and see a few lines about that just sort of give you the courage to show your work, and don't be afraid to own who you are. As a matter of fact, I'm a proponent of, by the time somebody recognizes you for what you are, you're already there. So I guess the best way to say it is, I feel like a show creator. And even when I was on Empire, I carried myself as one. I thought as one. I really tried to just, I'm already going to be a showrunner. So let me just be a showrunner. And that goes a long way. I think a lot of writers, they think they want to sit back and wait. They're like, oh, one day I'm going to wake up and I'll be a writer and then I'll act like one. No, I think you just go ahead and own it. If you're a writer and you're writing, then live as a writer. And how do writers live? They do their work. They show their work. This is a dance. And I always think about that because what I'm doing is preparing to seduce you as a reader to enjoy what I'm going to give you. So it's nothing if it's just me by myself all the time. Half of the journey is sharing it with others and getting that feedback and being open to that and not being afraid that they may throw rocks at me or whatever. It doesn't matter. What's more important is that I created something and I shared it and I got the feedback. And so now I'm in the middle of a dialogue and there's like a great amount of energy in that. It's like this, that's when the creativity, like, I don't know, it opens up and more can come. So I'm all about show your work.
Well, and it's what you've already done, which is, I don't even think you realize you did it. You've dovetailed perfectly into the third thing that I tell people. And this was one that I developed a few years ago, doing all of the work that I've learned in high performance psychology and all these things that I share on the podcast and the blog and in my paid programs now, is mindset. You have to develop mindset. And I didn't even realize the impact that this had on other people talking about it. But I said that you have to believe that what it is that you want to do, you are already that person. And the example that I give, and I actually talk about this in a podcast interview with my current assistant editor. For anybody that's listened for a long time, you've heard Natalie over and over and over, because she and I have done a ton of podcasts, but Natalie has now moved on and been promoted to editor. We still share a wall, so she's not too far away, but I'm still a little lonely. But like 2 years ago, this young kid comes up to me at an editing event, super shy, very introverted. And he said, hey, I've been listening to your podcast. I really love the stuff you're talking about. I really love how you're sharing all these kind of tips and tricks about how to make it in my career. What's the one piece of advice that you can give me? I am currently an online editor and a colorist, but I want to get into scripted. And I said to him, stop right there. The first thing that you need to do is stop introducing yourself that way. If you want to get into scripted, you say, I work in scripted. Right now, I just happen to be doing online coloring because that's what my job is, but I am a scripted editor. And that switch in his head changed everything. 2 years later, he's now my assistant because he switched. And he said that changed the way that he made all of his decisions. And it was just about changing your mindset. So so many people will come to me like via email, and the term I hear over and over and over is imposter syndrome. Well, they're going to find out I'm really not an editor. Or I'm really not a writer. And it's like, you got to own it and you have to develop the mindset. Like you said, on Empire, technically you were co-executive producer / writer or something, right? Which means nothing. In your mind, you're like, yeah, man, I'm show creator, showrunner, like, and that's not to step on anybody else's toes, like, Danny or Lee or Eileen, like that was just your mindset going in saying, I can do this and I'm going to own it. And I think that's so important for people, and it will help them get further in their career, because if you don't believe that you can do it, I guarantee nobody else is going to believe that you can do it.
Right. Yeah, that was very emotionally instructive for me too, because in walking in that truth in myself every day, saying, I am going to own this. Everything I'm going to do on this job, I'm going to do it as if it was my own. Having that level of commitment to it, it did a few things. One thing it did was that it really, anything that was a problem, I would just power right through it. I didn't really look at anything as being a detriment. I was going to just push it through, whatever it took, however many hours it took, however many phone calls, however much, whatever I had to do. I'll go in somebody's trailer, whatever I got to do, I'm going to make sure it gets done. So that was that, this huge drive that just like, I'm going to pummel through anything because I owned it. But the other thing it also did, and you can't see this coming, but you will, I guess, if you put yourself in this position, was that when people were violating my desire to really put this project before anything else, it gave me a very clear vision of what their goals and who they thought they were. And it gave me a really interesting perspective on all the different people I was working with. And part of that perspective really helped me in the transition from saying, I'm not going to staff anymore. I'm going to create my own show. Because I thought to myself, there are a lot of people in very high positions of power who don't even believe they can do it. And I already believe I can. So why am I answering to people and having to do things for people who actually don't believe in themselves, who are not walking the walk? That was a really interesting, instructive thing for me, because it gave me that extra level of confidence of like, you know what, I can do it. I can walk it. I can walk the walk and talk the talk and really mean it. And I believe in myself. I believe I have enough talent. I believe I have enough craftsmanship to show my work. So you know what? I can do this. That's another thing too. You can figure out who else around you really has the imposter syndrome.
Well, I'm going to try not to turn my podcast into a gossip show. So we won't name any names. We won't go any of those dark roads, because we've both done that with several glasses of wine over dinner more than once. My audience definitely knows. They don't know the whole story, but I've talked about, things were definitely difficult on Empire, and I did ultimately leave because I made the choice that quality of life and appreciating my life, appreciating what I did every day, and also being able to spend time with my family, those became paramount to the experience that I was going on, the experience that I had at Empire. That's all that I need to say. That's all that you need to say. We will move on from there.
By the way, I've run into this, not just Empire, and other things as well, in other areas of my life. It's just basically what I'm trying to say is, when you commit to who you are, commit to an identity that you really want to live, and you live through that identity, it will give you a new level of clarity about the people around you. That's really all I mean to say.
Yeah, and I can second that as well, because I'm also very much going through a transition of my mindset and my identity, and have been very transparent about it, because anybody that listens to the show is hearing me go through this transition where for a while I too had imposter syndrome, where I was like, who am I to get in front of a microphone and share things that work for me and tell other people that they can make a change in their life? Like, who am I to do that? Are you kidding me? Like, I have no business doing that. I'm a total fake. I'm a total imposter. So you just kind of own it. And you say, you know what? If people don't believe that I have something that I can offer to them through my own experiences and by bringing other people's experiences, well, then they're not the right people for me or for my show or for my program. But it took me a long time to get through that. And I never really went through that a lot with editing, because I'd spent so much time learning how to edit, developing my craft, like starting at 10 years old, VHS to VHS. So by the time I was in LA, I was like, well, I'm inexperienced, but this is who I am and this is what I do. So I never went through that, and I didn't identify with it until I decided to start a blog and a podcast. I'm like, wait, I'm sharing my life with people now and telling them that they can make changes and be better. Like, I shouldn't be doing that. But then all of a sudden I owned it. It's like, okay, now I'm more comfortable. And you're right. You are able to see insights in other people that you never really saw before. And that's where that mindset key is so important. Even if you don't want to be a showrunner, or you don't want to be, super successful writer, even if you just want to be a career assistant, if you just think in your mind, this is what I want to do, this is who I'm suited to be, own it. If that's not what you're doing, people ask you, well, I'm an assistant editor and scripted. Oh, great. What are you working on? Well, right now I happen to be on this other thing, but this is what I do. It's not a lie. It's part of your identity and part of your mindset. And it's such an important part of this whole picture of being able to get where you want to get and be successful.
Oh yeah. There's so many people out there, by the way, who call themselves writers, but who aren't actually writing anything. So you can always find out, right? So you say to them, okay, what did you write today? Or what are you working on? Or what, and if they have a follow-up to that, and they're very clear about their follow-up, then okay, they really are. But there's something to it. It's like, if you say you're a writer, and you tell yourself that every day, you kind of start to have to ask yourself those questions. Okay, I'm a writer. So what did I write today? And writing is like the perfect profession for procrastination, by the way. If you're a procrastinator, I mean, it's just, it's so hard to just show up sometimes to writing. But if you're that person, you saying yourself right off the bat, I'm a writer, it just declares that you must show up and you must write. And then everything else really starts to fall into place because you start putting in those 10,000 hours and you wake up one day and you say, oh my God, I'm actually a good writer.
Yep. And I think that one of the biggest fallacies that people make on both ends, either that say I am a writer or I'm not a writer, is they define it by a paycheck. Somebody's getting paid to be a writer, therefore they are one. Or I'm not getting paid yet, so I'm not a writer yet. And people are defining what they do based on what they're getting paid for. That's the biggest mistake that I think I see all the time.
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There's, writing, you're a writer if you do it without getting paid. You actually, that is what a writer is. Once the checks are coming in, it's sort of like the train's already left the station. But the writing itself, the craft itself, you have to want to do it no matter what. The very nature that you're going to get something in exchange for that work almost changes the work, to be honest with you. So you really do have to commit to writing on a very clear, non-transactional level. If you do that, then it's going to carry you through those times when you're not, making money at it, and you won't beat yourself up for it because you don't equate receiving something for it as a validation for it.
Exactly. And I think that that'll help us transition perfectly to the fourth of these areas that I talk about if you want to be successful based on these fundamental steps, and that is consistency. So you've worked on your craft, you've made sure that people know you're good at your craft, you've developed the mindset that you are what you're doing and you deserve to be doing that, but you have to do it consistently. And one of the ideas that just came up a few minutes ago when you were talking about people that call themselves writers but don't write. I wish I could attribute this quote to a specific person, and I can look it up and maybe put it in the show notes. But somebody had asked a writer once, like, how do you, when do you write? Like, what do you do? It's like, well, I only write when I'm inspired to write. And that inspiration comes at 9 o'clock every morning.
Yeah.
That consistency in all of these steps, the consistency in developing your craft, the consistency in reaching out to people, and consistently developing and strengthening that mindset. All of these pieces go together. And I feel like no matter what the craft is, if somebody's listening to this and they want to be a DP or they want to be a production designer or whatever it is in any kind of creative field, there never really is a set path with the way there is, like if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer. But if you are able to stick to these fundamental steps consistently, I feel like you're going to get there. It just isn't as guaranteed as, well, after 3 years of law school and 6 months of studying the bar, you're a lawyer. Like we all want that certainty and that control, and it's just not there.
Right. I think one of the best things for me personality wise is that I've never been that kind of person that gets a lot of confidence from following the rules. If you're a rule follower and you like order and you just want that, go into the military. Go do something that's really great for that personality. But if you're somebody who doesn't want to go down the structured pathway to where you need to be, if you're a wanderer, if you're somebody who just likes the adventure, and sometimes the adventure can be enough for you, not the destination, then the writing path, the producing path, the entertainment path could be really great for your personality. I'm that kind of person. Don't get, you put me on something where you say, okay, you do X, Y, and Z, and you will get the prize at the end. I get bored on Y. I'm like, well, this is no fun. If everyone just does X, Y, and Z, we get there. Well, this is no fun. I'm always that person who wants to find like the new door, the new opening, the new way in. So I guess I'm lucky in that sense that I don't have the kind of personality that needs guidelines. That said, I definitely am the personality that practices the kind of day-to-day practice that's required, the day-to-day discipline that's required to be an artist. And I think those are the guidelines that you put out. I think that's what's so beautiful about them. It's not a map. There's no such thing as a map in this business. It's these loose guidelines, sort of live your life by, loose practices. And if you become someone that shows up for them every day and does them, you can receive a lot of great satisfaction because you're actually doing what that thing is that you say that you're doing. You're kind of owning every minute of your life in a beautiful way. I think that that's important. I think that that's where we all kind of want to be when it comes to our occupations.
Well, speaking of owning every minute of your life, I want to be very respectful of your time and make sure that you can go back to owning your life, because we've already gone a little bit over than what I promised, but
Okay.
it was just too good to cut you off. It was just too good.
Aw.
And I think that this is going to be a fantastic episode that really inspires people in any creative field
Oh, good.
to, go to that next level and take some risks. And like, there's a reason you and I have stayed in touch for years and years and years, just because we're cut from the same cloth. And like, there's nothing that terrifies me more than rules. Like, oh God, get me away from structure and rules. Like, if somebody comes to me and says, this is a pretty formulaic show, we just need somebody to put it together, and like, no, I don't even want to take the meeting. But if they're like, listen, this is crazy, like, we don't even know if we can deliver it, like, this is totally, sign me up, don't care.
Yes.
I'm on. This is for me. I will do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you and I are cut from the same cloth, but I want to make sure that you have time to get back to your notes calls and your writing and all that other stuff. But I sincerely cannot express enough gratitude for you taking the time out of your day to share the story. And I have a feeling that I'll probably be roping you back into a part 2 sometime relatively soon.
Sounds great. It really was my pleasure. It's always good to share. I think I get a lot out of it. So I really appreciate and I'm honored that you asked. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to episode 16 of the Optimize Yourself podcast. To access the various links and resources mentioned in this episode, just visit optimizeyourself.me/episode 16. If this episode inspired you to start taking some real action to get where you want in Hollywood and land your dream job, I have great news, because you ain't seen nothing yet. I just released my brand new Ultimate Guide to Making It in Hollywood as a Creative. That is an absolute manifesto on the practical steps that you can take to begin forging your own path to success. No matter what creative craft you specialize in, these strategies that I provide in this guide will absolutely help you move forwards. I cover such topics as how to figure out which ladder you should be climbing and how to clarify the niche that's the best fit for your skill set, how to become awesome at your specific craft, as well as how to pitch yourself. And most importantly, I do a deep dive into the art and science of networking, especially if you're an introvert like me. This is 15 years of everything that I've learned throughout my own professional journey distilled down to one jam-packed guide, and I'm giving it to you 100% free. To download your ultimate guide, just visit optimizeyourself.me/Hollywood Ultimate Guide, and I will send it to your inbox immediately. Also, as a final super quick reminder, you can win a Topo Mat, Topo Mini, human charger device, or a 1-hour coaching session via Skype with yours truly. And all it takes to win is 2 minutes to leave an honest review of the show on iTunes to be eligible for prizes throughout the months of October and November. Visit optimizeyourself.me/win for more instructions and to register your review. Thank you for listening. Be well. This episode of the Optimize Yourself podcast was made possible by ErgoDriven, the makers of the Topo Mat and Topo Mini, my #1 recommendations for anyone interested in moving more at their height-adjustable workstation. Listen, standing desks are only great if you're standing well. Otherwise, you're constantly fighting fatigue and chronic pain. Not like any other anti-fatigue mat, the Topo is scientifically proven to help you move more throughout the day, which helps reduce discomfort and also increase your focus and productivity. My friends at ErgoDriven did extensive testing and compared their product to the top-of-the-line floor mats, and they found the Topo drove almost 2.5 more moves per minute with 270% more foot motion. Now, what this simply means is that the Topo users move more. I'm standing on one as I read this, and I don't go to a single job without it. And if you're smaller and you're concerned the Topo Mat is too big, or you simply don't have the floor space, there's a Topo Mini for that. To learn more, visit optimizeyourself.me/Topo. That's TOPO. This episode of the Optimize Yourself podcast was made possible by the Human Charger, a revolutionary new light therapy device made specifically for people who spend long days in the dark and don't get enough sunlight, i.e. you and me. It's not a light box. It's smaller than an iPod Nano, and it fits right in your pocket. Now, no different than listening to music, All you have to do is simply put in the earbuds for 12 minutes a day to receive your daily recommended dosage of UV-free white light. This light stimulates the photosensitive receptors in your brain, which then affects your neurochemistry via neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline. Doing so can drastically increase your energy, improve your mood, and increase mental alertness and focus. This device has literally changed my life, and I use it every morning without fail. To learn more, visit optimizeyourself.me/humancharger and use the code OPTIMIZE to get 20% off your order.